For a long time, I couldn't understand why I felt tired all the time. Not just physically, mentally. I was sleeping enough, eating fine, doing everything right. Then I realized the real exhaustion came from constantly thinking, worrying, and never fully switching off. Rest isn't just about sleep, it's about giving your mind permission to slow down. No one really talks about how motivation actually works. We're told to wait for it, to feel inspired before we start. But most of the time, motivation doesn't come first. Action does. The moment I stopped waiting to feel ready and just began, motivation slowly followed. That's the truth people usually learn too late. There's something that looks exactly like confidence, but is actually fear in disguise. It's pretending you don't care, acting unbothered, and never asking for help. I used to call it strength. In reality, I was just afraid of looking weak. Real confidence showed up when I admitted I didn't have everything figured out, and realized I never needed to. The moment I stopped caring what people thought of me, everything changed. I realized most opinions weren't about me at all. They were reflections of someone else's fears and expectations. Once I let that go, decisions became easier, confidence felt natural, and life felt lighter. Freedom didn't come from approval. It came from finally trusting myself. There was a moment when I realized I wasn't actually behind in life, I was just on a different timeline. Everyone around me seemed to be moving faster, better jobs, relationships, milestones. I kept comparing my chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 10. Then I understood something important. Progress doesn't look the same for everyone. Some people sprint, some people walk, but everyone reaches their place in their own time. That realization brought more peace than any achievement ever did. There's a habit almost everyone thinks is normal, but it's quietly ruining lives. Constantly being busy. Always tired, always rushing, always saying you'll rest later. It looks productive from the outside, but slowly it steals your health, your relationships, and your peace. One day you realize you're doing everything, except actually living. That's when it hits you. Being busy isn't the same as moving forward. What's the kindest thing a stranger ever did for you that you'll never forget? A few years ago, I was late for an important job interview. I missed my bus, it started raining, and I had no umbrella. Out of nowhere, a stranger pulled over in their car and offered me a ride, even though we were complete strangers. I hesitated, but they insisted. I made it to my interview just in time. I never saw them again, but that small act of kindness reminded me that even in a busy world, people still care. I've never forgotten that moment. There was a moment when I finally realized someone was never really on my side. It wasn't during a fight or an argument. It was when something good happened to me, and they stayed silent. No congratulations. No support, just distance. That's when it hit me. Some people don't want to see you fail, but they also don't want to see you succeed. They're only comfortable when you stay where they are. I didn't confront them. I just stopped explaining myself and started moving forward without them. What's a lie you believed for years, until one moment exposed the truth? I always thought that if I just worked hard and kept my head down, success would automatically follow. No networking, no asking for help, no speaking up. Just pure effort. Then one day, a coworker with less experience got promoted ahead of me. He wasn't smarter or luckier. He simply shared ideas, built connections, and made his work visible. That's when I realized the truth. Hard work matters, but being invisible doesn't get rewarded. I didn't stop working hard, I stopped working silently. What's something you ignored for years, and deeply regret now? For me, it was my health. I kept saying, I'm still young, I'll deal with it later. Late nights, junk food. No exercise. Nothing felt wrong, until one normal checkup. The doctor said, this didn't start today. It's been building for years. I didn't collapse. I didn't end up in the hospital. But I realized something scarier. I had warning signs, and I chose to ignore them. If you're telling yourself I'll fix it later, this is your reminder. What's a small decision you made that secretly changed your entire life? I almost skipped my college orientation because I was tired and didn't feel like going. At the last minute, I showed up late and sat in the very back. The guy next to me dropped his phone. I picked it up. We started talking. Turns out, he was already running a small online business. He later offered me a part-time job. That job paid my rent. That experience helped me start my own business. I graduated debt-free, all because I didn't go back to sleep. Sometimes, the smallest decisions rewrite your future. It was 2 weeks before graduation and the air in our high school felt electric. Everyone was obsessing over senior pranks, but Tyler and Jake, they weren't looking for a laugh, they were looking for payback. Mrs. Gable was the school librarian. She was old school. She didn't care if you were the starting quarterback or the prom king. If you were loud in her library, she'd write you up, no questions asked. Tyler had lost his starting spot for the playoffs because of a weekend detention she gave him, and he was livid. He and Jake didn't do something funny like filling her office with balloons. No, they stayed late and they did something vile. They knew she arrived at 6 in the morning to open the side entrance. They spent an hour in the dark coating the top of that steep concrete ramp with a mixture of industrial grease and clear floor wax. We were all hanging out across the street waiting to see her slip and slide. We thought she'd just look a little foolish, maybe ruin her dress, but when she hit that patch, her feet didn't just slide, they vanished from under her. She went airborne and landed head first right on the concrete edge. The sound, it wasn't a splash or a laugh, it was a crack like a dry branch snapping in the woods. She didn't get up, she didn't even move. The justice part is what still keeps me up at night. Mrs. Gable survived, but she'll never walk again. She's trapped in a chair for the rest of her life because a teenager couldn't handle a Saturday detention, and because Tyler's dad was on the school board. They called it a tragic accident. They got 40 hours of community service and a diploma. Every time I see a graduation photo, all I can think about is the sound of that crack. Growing up, my dad had this special name for me. He called me his little anchor. I thought it was the coolest thing in the world, like I was some kind of superhero or a bodyguard. Every Saturday morning when the mist was still thick over the pond behind our house, he'd take me out in his old beat-up rowboat. He'd tie this heavy, thick yellow nylon rope around my waist and the other end to his own belt. He'd look me right in the eyes with a look that felt like a prayer, and he'd whisper, "Don't let me drift away, buddy." Then he'd tell me to jump into the freezing water. I'd plunge in the cold, hitting my chest like a brick, and I'd kick and I'd splash, feeling that heavy tension on the rope. I'd look up and see him staring at the water, just staring. I'd climb back into the boat, teeth chattering, skin turning that scary shade of ghostly blue, and he'd wrap me in his old flannel shirt, sobbing. He'd hold me so tight it felt like my ribs might snap. I thought I was a legend. I thought I was literally holding our family together, keeping him from floating off into the sky. It wasn't until I was 24, cleaning out his attic, that I found the letters. He wasn't playing a game. He wasn't training me. He was checking the weight every Saturday. He was testing if I was heavy enough to pull us both to the bottom. He didn't want a protector, he wanted a partner for the end. I wasn't his anchor, I was his excuse.